Hello everyone, I'm pretending that it's Halloween in the middle of June, and today we're going to be talking about the silly horse cartoon that gave an entire generation nightmares. If you weren't already aware, the My Little Pony fandom is notorious for traumatizing all sorts of kids online, exposing them to disturbing gore and adult content they definitely shouldn't have seen at such a young age. The most popular example of this, aside from crude fan animations here on YouTube, is the large number of MLP Creepypastas that have been written over the years. For the sake of my extremely self-indulgent nostalgia, I will be discussing all sorts of stories from MLP Creepypastas, including my personal favorite series to dissect, the Muffins Saga. Before anything else, I think we should all acknowledge the elephant in the room, aka the two most well-known stories among MLP Creepypasta. Cupcakes was one of the very first grimdark fanfictions to be made in the My Little Pony universe. The authorship of this fan work is attributed to Sergeant Sprinkles, but I couldn't find any other information about them online. Cupcakes follows Pinkie Pie, who is depicted as a cannibalistic serial killer, luring Rainbow Dash into the basement of Sugar Cube Corner to torture and kill her. As the title would suggest, Rainbow Dash's body is then baked into cupcakes. This is an absolute classic, everyone knows this story, so I doubt it needs any farther explanation. A popular spin-off to Cupcakes is the Muffins Saga, which was my inspiration to make this video, but we won't talk about it here. No, not yet. I must save the story for the very end. Trust me, this deep dive is gonna be worth the wait. Rainbow Factory is one of the most other well-known fanfictions of this genre. Everybody knows the basics of this one. Pegasi turn their weak links into rainbows, so I won't waste time going into the specifics. It was written by Aurora Dawn, who is probably one of the coolest people that I have ever met. He's made other MLP fanfictions as well, and unlike many creators on this list, you can actually keep up to date with all of his recent work through his Twitter account. He posts all sorts of amazing artwork there, along with occasional tweets about the Pegasus device, which is an official collection of 5 Rainbow Factory stories you can buy a physical copy of. It might seem like I'm just shamelessly promoting his account, and that's because I totally am, but I promise this man definitely deserves the hype. He's got lots of other amazing stories and art that aren't even related to Rainbow Factory, and if you're interested even a tiny bit, I highly encourage you to check out his page. I got the chance to ask him about his work, he followed me on Twitter at some point, and he was nice enough to let me take inspiration from the character Aurora for one of the ponies in my webcomic. She's my precious baby girl, I will cherish her forever, and I'll talk more about my comic after we cover a few other popular fanfics. Now that we've got the two big boys out of the way, we can talk about some of the other most popular creepypastas in the MLP fandom. To make this list a bit simpler, I will be talking about the main fanfictions for the evil versions of the main 6, along with a few miscellaneous stories that are also very well known. Starting off our list is Pinkie Pie. Aside from Cupcakes, there aren't very many other popular stories about her. It seems like Cupcakes was so popular that everyone else either wrote spin-offs to that story or focused on different characters instead. So I did some digging, and I managed to find 3 good fanfics that aren't connected to Cupcakes in any way. Wanna Play is part of a series called Why I Stopped Watching My Little Pony, which is a sort of lost media story similar to Ben Drowned or Candle Cove. Truth Be Told shows us what would happen if the MLP universe was rewritten to match Lauren Faust's original vision, and it's genuinely one of my favorite fanfics out of everyone on this list. Last but not least, Rotten Harmony, which is a comic currently being created by artist Melody Melancholy on Twitter. I won't spoil anything here, but you should go read the comic. It's pretty short so far, but the world building and characterization is really good.
What? Wow, Fluttershy! Did you just see my forever weed brownie? It was the only way to the what?
Next up is Applejack. The most popular stories about Applejack are An Apple Sleep Experiment, The Orchard, Bittersweet Apple Acres, Let Me Tell You About the Hole in My Face, and Apple Eyes. All of these are fairly well known, but I want to use this section to mention one of my personal favorites, Cream and Sugar. This is more of a sad fic than a traditional creepypasta, but I think the story is very compelling and I can't recommend it enough.
Shut it down! Code red! Burn the evidence and run!
For Fluttershy, there are actually a lot of really popular stories. I'd guess it's because Fluttershy might be the member of the main 6 with the most to work with for a unique, spooky concept, but it might also just because seeing the quiet character snap is just a fun gimmick. The most popular stories about Fluttershy are Butterflies, Let Her In, Flutter Schmooze, My Little Amnesia, Silent Ponyville 2, and the crazy parody of Fluttershy depicted in the pony.mov series. One of the lesser-known stories is Angel of Mercy, which I find characterizes evil Fluttershy in a surprisingly compelling way, especially compared to the typical Evil Main 6 stories.
Well, we're fucked.
Take it away, fellas.
Rainbow Dash is the character with the most creepypastas written about her, both as a killer and as a victim. Unlike Pinkie Pie, who had her entire genre of stories defined by cupcakes, Rainbow Dash fanfics tend to come up with a ton of ideas that are very different from Rainbow Factory, even though that story is clearly the most well-known. The most popular stories about Rainbow Dash are Rocket to Insanity, Rainbow.exe, Quad Timeo, and Dreamy Rainbow. I wish I had more to say about Rainbow Dash herself, since I had so much to say about Rainbow Factory earlier, but I can't think of anything. I will mention that I really liked Rainbine as a kid though, since Robot Rainbow Dash's voice was cool and I thought she was funny.
I'm Rainbine! Pretty cool name, huh?
Hate to interrupt your boasting, Papa. Where's Twilight?
Shit!
The general consensus of Twilight Sparkle, according to the MLP fandom, is that she's always seconds away from losing her shit. In fact, even if Rainbow Dash has the most written about her, Twilight has the largest variety of different stories. The most popular stories about Twilight are The Experiments of Twilight Sparkle, Forever Faithful, Rapid Blank, Twilight's Dollhouse, Somno Cactus, and Diary of a Time Looper. My personal favorites are The Ever Ash Project, My Little AI, and Starless Sunlight. The ending on that last one was fucking brutal. I love it.
I watched him sleep in bed at night. It's not creepy.
Finally, we have Rarity. She's one of my favorite ponies, so obviously her fanfics must be my favorite as well. Right? Right? The most popular stories about Rarity are Rarity's New Patterns, and Rarity's Collection, and, Nightmare Rarity counts, I think. But, yeah, that's all of them. I don't think there's anything else, so we can totally just— I have to talk about Little Miss Rarity, don't I? Fine, I don't really want to, but fine. I'd never actually read Little Miss Rarity, but I do know the basics of who the character is and what she's from. Rarity gets scratched by her cat, accidentally kills the cat, discovers that she enjoys the pain, and yeah, that's all I got. I've heard other YouTubers dodge this topic in their own creepypasta videos, but I am determined. I am brave, and I am strong. Thus, I will spend the next hour of my life reading the blog. It's porn. I don't know what I expected, but it certainly wasn't porn. I had to take a few breaks while reading because it was really creepy and gross. I'm gonna try to explain a bit more than that, since most YouTubers just stop there, but I know my audience is a bit younger than I am, so I'll try to censor this as much as possible. Even when the blog would do a crossover with other pages, it was usually just to have the characters torture each other in unconventionally romantic ways, I guess. You know it's bad when all of the comic dubs on YouTube have to censor the artwork. The reason I don't like this creepypasta so much is due to the fact that Little Miss Rarity is the most popular version of Evil Rarity online, so all sorts of little kids would draw her or watch videos about the character, and it often led to a lot of kids accidentally learning what the word porn means. It's bad. It's very bad. Moving on.
Applejack. And Rarity, who's also in the show.
These stories are all very silly, objectively speaking, but what fanfiction isn't? I just like reading spooky pony stories. Without them, I would have never been inspired to create horror projects today, like Welcome to Dreamworld or my very own pony creepypasta, Containment Records. Oh man, that one really takes me back. Speaking of my work, we're going to take a 30-second detour to quickly mention Heroes of Destiny. You see, the MLP fandom played a huge role in the creation of my webcomic. You can read it on my website down below, or find comic dubs to watch here on YouTube. Here's a sneak peek at some of the Brony characters you will see throughout the story. All of these characters were created with the permission and approval of the source material's creators. These characters and this comic mean a lot to me, so I really wanted to talk about it here before we continue. Feel free to read their inspiration credits on Toy House if you're ever interested, and go show all of these amazing creators lots of love. Back to the topic of today's video, Grimdark MLP fanfictions. Other popular creepypastas would include Cheerily's Garden, Puppet to Her Fame, The Cough, Awoken, The Trees Are Screaming, and Haunting Nightmare. My personal favorite stories from this collection are Story of the Blanks, Something Sweet to Bite, I Cast a Deadly Shadow, A Fleeting Light in the Darkness, Grogar, and In Bloom. However, nothing even comes remotely close to my obsession with this super obscure spin-off to Cupcakes, a series that hasn't been extensively covered by any fandom creators. The Muffins Saga. The Muffins Saga was a grimdark fanfiction that began in 2013, created by a YouTuber who would record narrated videos for each installment of the series. As I mentioned before, this story was a spin-off to Cupcakes. Roughly 37 stories were written for the series before it would go on a permanent hiatus in 2017. In this video and the comments below, I want us to refrain from discussing or naming the author of this fanfiction. This is out of respect for their privacy, and it is also to prevent any drama. If you're interested in learning more, I encourage you to read about the story's origins, but please be careful when doing so. A majority of my audience tends to skew a bit young, like I said before, and I don't want any of y'all to accidentally stumble across something unsavory or uncomfortable, especially since the author has posted photographs of real blood and SH content on a blog. In fact, unless you're 18 years or older, I highly recommend watching YouTube videos about this topic instead, to avoid any not great stuff you might find elsewhere online. Anyways, back to pony stuff. The Muffins Saga has got to be one of my favorite topics to discuss when it comes to MLP Creepypasta. I have spent an entire year of my life shamelessly researching the original author and reading everything there was to know about this fanfiction. I'd never even heard of it until my best friend Nettle mentioned it last year, and then I immediately became obsessed. I love this series. Everything I say comes from a place of love. According to the wiki, because you better believe this series has a wiki, the series follows a tightly knit group of ponies who torture and murder other ponies. The series starts with Derpy Hooves discovering a Sugar Cube Corner's hidden basement with Pinkie Pie, revealed to kidnap ponies and bake them into pastries, and a drugged-up Candymane inside. Pinkie manages to convince Derpy to partake in Candymane's torture and murder, and makes Derpy her second apprentice next to Apple Bloom. That sounds like a very basic premise, right? It's just another clone of the formula in Cupcakes. What could possibly be so special about this story? Well, for starters, it features Pinkie Pie's long-lost sister, no, not that one, Minkie Pie, who was secretly locked in a cellar beneath their family's rock farm for a whopping 20 years. This story also would have ended with all of the characters killing God and becoming alicorn princesses who rule the world. If you aren't interested yet, I am shocked. Now, this wouldn't be a proper Muffins deep dive without a proper story summary, would it? Luckily, I have read the entire fanfiction 3 times in the course of a year, so I am more than qualified to give you a recap. To make my life easier, I'll be going through the stories in chronological order instead of the order they came out. The Imprisoned Pie shows us how Minkie Pie was locked up in a cellar as a filly. You see, it was because her parents thought she was evil, so they shunned her because they were very religious? I don't know what religion they follow, because they're horses, but hey, good for them. Also, Minkie Pie got her cutie mark, a lock, because she was destined to be locked up forever. Bubbles shows us the backstory of Derpy Hooves, who is implied to be abandoned by her mother at a very young age. This fic was actually written by a completely different person, and you can immediately tell because the writing style is very different from what we see in the Muffins Saga, but the story is still accepted into the world's canon. Pinkie Pie's success is about how Pinkie and her sisters started making cupcakes out of dead people. While rummaging through the pantry, Pinkie cut her hoof on a cheese grater. She licked the blood, realized it tasted sweet, and concluded that this must be the ingredient her cupcakes were missing. So, just like any other rational person would do, she kills another kid in town and bakes their corpse into cupcakes. The kid is named Raincloud, and apparently the author claims that this was a mercy kill because the kid was depressed all the time. Aw, that's really sad. Even Rocks Break is Inkie's backstory, All That Glitters is Blinkie's backstory, and The Element of Kindness is Fluttershy's backstory. The only events of note in these chapters is the loss of Peppo, Blinkie Pie's pet gecko, who was brutally stomped to death by their mom. Holy fuck! Also, Blinkie got her cutie mark by discovering treasure, and then their grandma died trying to retrieve it for her. Their grandma is never mentioned again, and this plot point has no impact on Blinkie as a character, so I have no idea why it was mentioned at all. Also, Fluttershy has the most dramatic, tragic backstory ever, like, what the hell. In Party of None, Pinkie Pie is depressed because she can't bake cupcakes with dead bodies in them after moving to Ponyville, so she considers unaliving herself. Then she finds a bunch of ancient torture machines and decides to live instead. Broken Tiara shows us Apple Bloom, who is Pinkie's apprentice and has no backstory by the way, being groomed and manipulated into committing her first murder. However, we aren't supposed to think that Apple Bloom was manipulated by Pinkie, no. Apple Bloom was totally aware of her actions and was never groomed into it, even though she's canonically like 10 years old in this series. The Party Pony is a series of vignettes from Derpy's life, such as her moving in with Pinkie, but we have to skip it for now. Cupcakes is the original, then we have Silence is Silver, which is another story where Apple Bloom is manipulated and groomed into killing people. You see, when Apple Bloom decides she doesn't want to kill Silver Spoon, Pinkie Pie handles this like any functioning adult would do when they're mentoring a 10-year-old. She slits her throat and forces Apple Bloom to drain all of Silver Spoon's blood just to revive her. This story is gross. It's just gross, especially in the context of later chapters like the trial. Alright, what's next? Muffins is the first one I already summarized, where Derpy joins Pinkie and totally isn't manipulated into killing someone. Derpy's first project is torture porn, Derpy's story is a character chapter, Payback is more torture porn, and The Revenge of Obsidian Pie is where Minkie is discovered by her sisters on the rock farm. They kill their parents and then move to Ponyville, and the Pie sisters reunited, where Pinkie gets to learn about their new sister. Meet the Team shows us the other members of the main six meeting Pinkie's three sisters, except for Rainbott, because Rainbott is fucking dead. Everyone basically cries over Minkie's super tragic backstory, and then Fluttershy cries because Minkie scares her. Minkie Pie's turn is torture porn, again, and Free Like a Pegasus shows Derpy becoming super close friends with Minkie. This chapter is one of the many reasons that the fanbase ships Minkie and Derpy, because they're literally acting like a lesbian couple, and I love it. The Mad Musings of Obsidian Pie are a series of chapters that I tend to skip when I'm rereading the series, because they're just long rants where the author vents their thoughts around the world or other people by attaching these ideas to the character of Minkie Pie. I don't really feel comfortable talking about that, so I'll be skipping these from now on. Inkie Pie's birthday is about Inkie Pie's birthday. Apple Bloom gets her cutie mark shows us how Apple Bloom earns her cutie mark by murdering Applejack. By the way, her cutie mark is an apple with a fucking knife in it, and I think that's hilarious. Just a Little Girl Time is a short chapter dedicated to the girlies getting makeovers. I love it. Inkie's Stellar Obsession is one of my favorite installments of the series, purely because of all the crazy information surrounding it. Inkie Pie is obsessed with a pretty Mary Sue character named Stella Burst, and wants to kill her to make a bag from her perfect fur. Unfortunately, she gets excited and accidentally kills Stella too quickly, staining part of her fur in the process. When the other bakers return, they find Inkie having a meltdown, crying because she wanted to torture Stella longer, and hates that her perfect fur is now ruined. What the fuck? Also, Stella Burst isn't really one of the author's OCs. She was created for one of the author's friends as a gift, so that friend would be the one who owns Stella. However, in an update to the original Deviantart post, the author added Stella Burst to the Muffins Saga's fan folder, claiming that she, quote-unquote, wouldn't be alive for much longer. Apparently this is because the author's friend betrayed them, so the author revoked the character to kill them brutally in a random chapter of Muffins. This would be the equivalent of me designing a character for someone and giving the character as a gift, but then deciding the character is mine again right after because I don't like that friend anymore. That's not really how it works. Like at all. Even if we don't know who the friend was, it can be concluded that this anonymous friend is the one who rightfully owns Stella as a character, not the author, so this is a bit fucked up. The author also claims that they never gave the character away officially, but everything on the original post is so old by now that it's really hard to tell, especially since we don't know who their friend even was. Not cool either way. Also, the fandom has decided to ship Inkie and Stella together. Another win for the girls! We get another Mad Musings chapter before the fun never ends, which is meant to be the original ending to the series before the author was pressured into making more. Regardless of who the author is or what they might have done, it's still really terrible to pressure a creator into continuing a project when they decide to be done with it. In the story of this chapter, Rarity is killed, Twilight goes insane enough to be put in a mental hospital, Fluttershy now wears an eye patch, and the Pie sisters are all taken into custody by police officers. Fluttershy returns to Ponyville after she leaves the hospital and recovers, but she runs into Babseed, who takes her to Sugar Cube Corner. Apple Bloom is a killer wanted by the police. Babs is her cousin, and she wants to take Fluttershy to the place where the bakers used to hide out. What could possibly go wrong? Yeah, no, Fluttershy dies shortly after this. On Trial takes place in the middle of the last chapter, along with Prison Break and Grudge of a Bad Seed. On Trial is about the Pie Sisters on trial, blaming the princesses for everything and claiming to control death. Prison Break shows us how two 10-year-olds and the Pegasus break the Pie Sisters out of prison, even though it should be heavily guarded and have magical defenses. Grudge of a Bad Seed is Bad Seed's backstory, and it's definitely the best part of the entire Muffins Saga by a landslide. But there are still a lot of uncomfortable elements that keep the story from being truly great. Farewell to Kindness is torture porn, again, a Mad Musings chapter. Twilight's Fall is where Twilight unalives herself at the mental ward because a 10-year-old girl threatened her, another Mad Musings chapter, and the final crusade is about Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle being forced to play a rigged game of Saw, which is basically an extended gore sequence where two children are forced to torture each other while a group of mostly adults watch. That's kind of fucked up and creepy, even with all of the other murder stuff. It's also the most frustrating chapter to read, but there's still one chapter that I hate more than this one, so it's technically not the worst. Let's Welcome Chaos is a series of 3 chapters that show us how Pinkie Pie's team of serial killers took out the entire equestrian military and also demolished all of Ponyville. 5 women and 2 10-year-old girls, all of whom have no magic and only use weapons like blades or crossbows, somehow managed to set up a terrorist attack elaborate enough to create an impenetrable wall around all of Ponyville, hunt down every single civilian of Ponyville, capture nearly 300 victims, set off multiple bombs, overpower anyone who tries to fight them with magic, and defeat an entire army of highly skilled soldiers who were personally trained by God herself. Yeah, this is where the story gets really stupid. Sting is the last chapter of Muffins, both chronologically and officially, where a spy sent by Princess Celestria fails to infiltrate the group of bakers and gets brutally killed by them. I refuse to describe this chapter in any more detail because I hate it. This is the only chapter in the entire series that I genuinely dislike, solely because it is shamelessly gross, even past the usual torture porn we get in the fanfic. Trust me, it's not worth it.
Also, before we're done with this section of the video, we need to talk about Derpy. More specifically, we need to talk about all of the blatant ableism in the series. Yay!
According to the Muffins Wiki, Derpy Hooves was a single born with an unnamed developmental disability that made her unable to fly or learn as well as her peers, forcing her family to live on the ground. Additionally, the author has expressed that Derpy is not autistic, although she probably has some kind of cognitive disorder. If you've never read the fanfic before, you're probably still on board with this idea because there isn't anything inherently wrong with it. In fact, I have ADHD, I know tons of folks with autism, and a lot of my closest friends are also on the spectrum. Writing neurodivergent representation in media can be a very good thing, even when it comes to the world of fanfictions, but there are certainly right and wrong ways to go about doing it. Even if Derpy is not intended to be autistic in the Muffins Saga, she is written in a way that heavily leans on a lot of the negative stereotypes and tropes that neurotypical people often associate with autism. It doesn't really help that the author has made multiple uploads about the issue, frequently speaking down to her fans in a very condescending manner. This video's thumbnail isn't really doing them any favors. Even if a character is not intended to be autistic, it doesn't mean they can't be autistic coded. For people on the spectrum, an autistic-coded character is not a character they would like to be autistic or have a few vaguely autistic traits. Instead, the term refers to a character who is so obviously autistic that they must actually be autistic. Again, this can be recognized through the use of common tropes associated with the autistic community, similarly to how queer-coded characters display gay stereotypes like being overly flamboyant. When it comes to Derpy specifically, we also have to recognize the fact that a large majority of the MLP fandom interprets her character to be on the spectrum, even in canon episodes of the My Little Pony cartoon. There used to be a huge controversy where a soccer mom complained that Derpy was an offensive stereotype, but most of the people in the autistic community just loved her and thought she was fun. No, Derpy in MLP is not nearly as offensive as Derpy's portrayal in the Muffins Saga, and that's coming from someone who is a pretty big fan of this story. Just like we have to acknowledge what the original fanfiction was, we also have to acknowledge some of the harmful characterizations present within the series. The author insists that Derpy does not have autism in the fanfic, but they also don't give clarity on what specific type of learning disability Derpy has. In a YouTube video, they said it's some sort of genetic mutation, but that's the most information we've gotten. With that being said, I still believe that it's worthwhile to read the story from the perspective of an autistic person, especially since the author themselves has stated that they might be on the spectrum. I think it's important to see how people can perceive and consume a piece of media, even if it may not be as intended, because that's a simple fact about any type of story. You can't control how fans will perceive a story when they read it. You can only learn from it. For instance, I can't control the headcanons people make about my characters in Welcome to Dreamworld, and I absolutely take no offense in it because that's how fandom culture works. With that being said, I have ADHD, but I am not officially diagnosed with autism. I may not be qualified to go in depth covering an issue like this. Luckily, I have plenty of friends who do have autism, and they were willing to help me make this video. To get a good idea of Derpy's portrayal throughout the Muffins Saga, I have had my friends read and review 4 chapters of the fanfiction. Muffins, the first story of the series that was posted in July of 2013, Payback, a Derpy-centric chapter written less than 2 months later, The Party Pony, another chapter about Derpy that was made in 2014, and On Trial, a chapter posted in 2015 where we only discussed the part where Derpy was mentioned. Since the later stories of the series were made more about group events instead of individual characters, I think that we have a pretty good variety of material to work with here. After all, most of these stories were published nearly an entire year apart, so that will give us a very good idea for how Derpy is written throughout.
For this section of the video, I will simply read the various comments and notes that my friends sent me as they read each chapter. I have not read them yet, I just pasted them into a document, so let's get started. As you can see, I am wearing my Derpy shirt from 2013. I am very shocked this still fits me. And I am representing the brand, so now I am ready to immerse myself. I had, a bunch of different people on the spectrum and a bunch of different people with autism specifically read through those 4 chapters of the fanfiction, and I had 2 of them compile the basics of their notes so I could put them onto this document. I literally just copied-pasted everything in order, and I haven't read it yet, so here is my lovely blind reaction to everyone's favorite muffin horse and how she is represented and perceived by autistic people reading the fanfictions for the very first time. None of these people have ever read these stories beforehand. I told them a little bit about it, but none of them have actually read them. So, let's see. Let's start with Muffins. Why is the cellar door unlocked, Pinkie? You live at Sugar Cube Corner. The owners could walk in at literally any... That's a good point. Also, how do the cakes not know about the cellar that is under their bakery? I don't fucking know. I didn't write it. Speaking of which, how did Derpy find the cellar but not Pinkie's literal landlords? Is it the power of autistic sensing? Really gave Derpy the I'm not like other girls treatment instead of acknowledging she's autistic coded. She seemed a bit mentally challenged, but she was sweet nonetheless. What? Please stop infantilizing autistic people. Ain't no motherfucking way. Pinkie is manipulating Derpy into thinking everything is fine. Derpy is goofy, not stupid. There's a difference between social cues being difficult and just being completely unaware of what's actually going on in a literal torture chamber, and my god, I shouldn't have to explain this. Pinkie, I think she's sleepy. Brug. I think Derpy's organ story is the most ableist thing I've ever heard, and I grew up at a private school. Also, please stop infantilizing autistic people, part 2. Okay, side note about the whole bit with the body parts that Derpy plays with, just makes me think of the body song from the 5th Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Second side note, where the fuck did Apple Bloom come from? Okay, already with the R slur. Yikes. Oh, alright, R slur. I really want to know the etymology of the R slur in the My Little Pony universe. Did the author purposely use terrible grammar with Derpy's dialogue even though her grammar was fine in the other chapter? Also, yeah, this is something that I did notice when I was reading the series in the order that it came out. In the first chapter, Derpy speaks, completely fine, just like any of the other characters, and then as the series progresses, not chronologically, so it's really confusing, but as the chapters came out, her grammar and pronunciation just got increasingly worse in, every chapter. And I think they're probably going to be talking about that here. Yeah, the author definitely made Derpy unable to use proper grammar in this chapter to show she's disabled and highlight why she was bullied, which is just wow. Pinkie calls my great idea brain smarties. Oh god, please stop infantilizing autistic people, part 3! Yeah, the whole third person thing is way off. Like, she doesn't even do it in the first story at all. Where is this coming from? I can't get over how the author just continuously reduces Derpy's IQ/mental age as the story progresses. It's like she's a toddler that has sporadic moments of calculated sadism. That's a word for it. I not has anymore. Why is Derpy immediately worse at speaking? Also, she keeps switching back and forth between first and third person, which is just inconsistent in general. Yeah, I really don't like that Derpy just talks in the third person. You wouldn't do that, would you, sweetheart?
No, I wouldn't.
Cut that part out of the video. As she followed Applejack, she glanced back at the angry vendor, who actually looked disappointed that Applejack had come to Derpy's rescue. Why did they feel the need to specify that? Rainbow Dash frowned, having never heard Derpy speak before. She now understood quite a few mishaps during Pegasi duties. Oh my god, you've gotta be kidding. The entire bit about the main six talking slowly to Derpy is just so bad. I get it if the author's trying to be like, hey, we don't need to talk differently around autistic people, but this is really poorly executed. Also, why is Rainbow Dash the douchebag? SMH, this is homophobia. Please stop implying disabled people are idiots who constantly keep messing up and making mistakes and are people to be pitied. It's disgusting and extremely uncomfortable. She's a Pegasus like you! Rarity's acting like a mom introducing her child to her friend's kid who's also in the same class. I'm so done. Applejack did not just refer to Derpy being autistic/disabled as some of the less fortunate things in the world. I forgot about that line! I didn't realize that Derpy was what? Say it, asshole! Though her eyes should have been a clue. Girl, how many cross-eyed autistic people do you know? Is cross eyes a symptom of equine autism? Guys, there's nothing wrong with her. Yes, thank you. She's just a bit different. Fuck! Handicap Pegasus, oh dear lord, took advantage of their innocence. Oh dear lord! Again with the R slur, again with the infantilization of autistic people. Why do they have to keep bringing the R slur back? Okay, I think the Derpy part is done, but hot damn, I'm reading the rest of this one. It's like watching a car wreck in slow motion. So with all of that being said, yeah, Derpy is very poorly written in this fanfiction. The Muffins Saga is a very good example of what a lot of creepypasta stories were like in the early 2010s. It's a perfect time capsule for the age of lengthy paragraphs describing absurd amounts of torture porn with little substance or meaning. Back then, the standard for online horror was much lower than what it is today. In the early 2010s, fanfictions like Muffins, or even Cupcakes itself, were considered to be groundbreaking, even if they were only effective by being shocking at the time. Indie and mascot horror are both genres heavily associated with the concept of turning nostalgic properties or child-friendly characters into spooky monsters that kill people. So now that the shock factor of this idea is completely gone, what else is there? If the Muffins Saga can't be considered shocking anymore, let alone genuinely scary, what is there left for us to discuss? Well, I can think of a few talking points. I rewrote it. I rewrote the entire series. I reimagined all of the characters into my own creations. I gave the story a more consistent form of world building, and I even fixed all of the lackluster character backgrounds. I did it. I fixed the Muffins Saga. Why? I have no fucking clue, but hey, why not? In all seriousness, I actually did this to reclaim the character of Minkie Pie and the rest of Muffins for the fanbase who still enjoy these characters today. Despite being very poorly written, the Muffins Saga is considered to be an infamous classic of MLP Creepypasta, and a lot of people have begun to really enjoy Minkie as a character. Unfortunately, the author of the original fanfiction has done a lot of not-so-great stuff, which I will still refrain from explaining out of respect for their privacy. However, a lot of people were really uncomfortable making fan art or continuing to enjoy the story because of all that not great stuff the author has been up to. In fact, one of my good friends has actually been obsessed with the series for as long as I can remember, and they're the main reason I was inspired to create my rewrite. Thus, I have made a Toy House page for Minkie Pie, but not the original one.
Instead, I created my own take on Minkie Pie with a different rock-based name and a new cutie mark. This page is the culmination of my efforts to reclaim the Muffins Saga and its characters for the MLP fandom. Just to clarify, I did not use any of the author's original characters in my rewrite, I made new ones to take their place. The only exception to this rule is Minkie herself, but that's because Minkie is literally just a recolor of Pinkamino with slightly longer hair. The author has made posts to disprove this fact, but come on, do I really have to say it?
Anyway, if you thought my summary of the original fanfiction was long, the summary of Icing on the Cake is somehow even longer.
Instead of going through the entire summary for my rewrite, I'd like to highlight some of the major changes I made to the source material. I'm also going to be doing a lot of rambling, so I'll be showing artwork from Minkie Pie's gallery as the visuals. Each of these pieces was edited to feature my Minkie's new design, so she can't be mistaken for the original, and all artists are credited beneath each image. I only included artwork from creators who gave me permission to use their content for the Reclamation project. Now, to keep this section short, I will limit myself to 3 bullet points before we wrap everything up. Number 1, world building. Number 2, characterization. Number 3, the ending. The world building of Muffins Rescripted is immediately very different from the original story. First of all, there's an actual reason why Pinkie Pie gets the idea to use pony meat in her cupcakes. While their parents shop for ingredients, the Pie sisters play a game of hide-and-seek in the marketplace, one that eventually leads Pinkie Pie to discover a puppet show being performed at the center of town. The puppets are telling the story of Nightmare Moon, recounting the wicked Alicorn's battle with Celestia. According to the puppet show, Nightmare Moon was a monster with a terrible sweet tooth, and nothing would satisfy it more than the blood of little ponies. Every evening, she would kidnap civilians and bring them to her lair, where she feasts upon sweet pony flesh all night long. Her reign of terror only came to an end when Princess Celestia banished her to the moon. Even so, there is one day a year when she saves enough strength to return to Equestria, and Nightmare Moon prowls in the shadows in search of treats. Ponies are said to taste sweeter than any fruit or syrup, so citizens would begin leaving candy outside of their doorstep as an offering to the Dark Alicorn. If their offering of candies satisfied Nightmare Moon's craving for sweets, she would spare them and move on to the next house. Pinkie thinks about the puppet show all afternoon, but it isn't until later that she makes a discovery. The legend of Nightmare Moon was only supposed to be an old mare's tale, but Pinkie accidentally cuts herself while raiding the pantry late at night, and she discovers that pony blood really does taste just as sweet as the story said. This gives her an idea to make her cupcakes the best. Isn't that way cooler? It's also edgy as fuck, so we don't even lose points on that front. I also wrote the story summaries out in chronological order, so I could list the backstories up front. And yes, I basically rewrote every character's backstory. Hell, since Apple Bloom didn't get a backstory in the original, I also made one for her too. Speaking of backstories, I rewrote Minkie Pie's to be more compelling and give her character some substance. Minkie was the first and oldest Pie sister. As a filly, she asked a lot of questions and was fascinated by the world beyond the family rock farm. Her intrigue was sparked by a beautiful butterfly she spotted out in the fields of the rock farm. She'd never seen such a beautiful creature, so she thought the winged insect might be an angel. Later, while cleaning her family's cabin, Minkie discovers that very same butterfly dead in the pantry. Despite being heartbroken by the loss of such a beautiful thing, Minkie is also fascinated by how the creature's body worked, specifically how its wings gave it the ability to fly. Minkie began to dissect insects and study them, taking notes and comparing them to books at the village library on her parents' weekly trips into the marketplace. Minkie's parents were disturbed by their daughter's fascination, seeing it as wicked and wrong. When she was discovered examining the body of a dead bird, her parents decided that she was evil and ordered her to stop her studies. Minkie didn't understand why her interests upset her parents so much. Why did death have to be a bad thing? She only wanted to understand how the world worked. Surely, there had to be all sorts of ways to do things, like flying. She sought to discover the truths of the world, even if her methods were unconventional by nature. This would all change when Blinky, the second oldest Pie sister, was born. Minkie's parents warned her not to show her baby sister any of her notes, insisting that she would be punished if she disobeyed. At this time, her parents were fully convinced that Minkie was a child of discord, a pony brought into the world to sow the seeds of chaos and evil into all that they touched. While ponykind may not be religious by any means, the ancient stories of Celestia and Luna have been passed down through generations, and Discord's legacy is one that left a dark shadow over the parts of Equestria he had previously ruled. For instance, the family's rock farm is built on land that was left too barren for nature to return after Discord's defeat, which only added to their fears that their firstborn daughter was depraved. About 1 year later, their parents were expecting another filly. Minkie took her baby sister outside to play, but the two became distracted when a butterfly landed on the porch beside them. Not knowing any better, Blinky was drawn to the insect's bright colors and stomped on it. Minkie was horrified. Fearing that their parents would grow to hate Blinky for following in her footsteps, Minkie framed herself and took the blame for the butterfly's death. This was the final straw for their parents, who saw this as a disobedient child sharing her wicked teachings onto their newborn. Minkie was locked in a cellar beneath the rock farm, abandoned with little to eat and no one to answer her endless stream of questions. It was during this time in prison that she got her cutie mark, when she spent years trying to escape and always yearning for more. Yeah, insert mic drop here. I think that was pretty good. Next up, the characterization. You're immediately going to see a lot of big differences here as well. Most notably, Derpy and Minkie canonically become an official couple, Babsy doesn't become one of the bakers, a few members of the main six live, and they don't defeat the entire equestrian military because that was really stupid. Also, Derpy does have autism, and ADHD as well, but she doesn't have any issues speaking like she does in the original. I don't want to ramble too much, so I'll only talk about my favorite change of characterization, which is the story about Inky Pie and Stella Burst. First of all, I can't use Stella because she's not mine or the author's OC, so I made Bellatrix to fill this role instead. Secondly, this is what I wrote. It was a gloomy day in Ponyville, and Applejack's disappearance is preventing most people from going outside. Inky and Blinky wander around the market together, bored out of their minds. The 4 other bakers are busy chaperoning Applebloom's class trip to the museum. Blinky claims that Minkie is turning into a geek, but Inky reminds her that baking doesn't have to be their sister's only hobby, especially since they already knew that Minkie liked to read. Suddenly, Inky spots a beautiful Pegasus mare at a craft vendor. The Pegasus mare was lime green with brilliant, vibrant pink hair and blue highlights. Taken aback by the friendly mare's otherworldly beauty, Inky was drawn to her and gasps, "I want that pony! I need that pony!" When the Pegasus looks prepared to take flight, Inky runs forward. She introduces herself as Pinkie Pie's sister, and the Pegasus mare gives her own name, Bellatrix. She is an astrology major who recently moved to study the stars around this part of Equestria. She's also an avid fan of rare rocks, immediately intrigued when Inky informs her that the Pie family used to live on a rock farm. During this exchange, Inky is practically head over heels for Bellatrix, fumbling and flustered to the point of needing to sit down. Blinky tries not to gag, grumbling about how she hates pretty mares, clearly furious that her sister has become infatuated with one of them. Thus, Inky's plan begins. She spends the rest of the day with Bellatrix, then a week, and finally 3 whole months. The 2 mares enjoy one another's company, chatting away about rare minerals and gemstones. Inky teaches Bellatrix how to play games with marbles. Bellatrix teaches Inky how to stargaze. The fun comes to an end when Inky's obsession with the beautiful mare becomes overbearing. Spending time with Bellatrix isn't enough, since the Pegasus is all she can think about when they're apart. She wants to have her all to herself, but she can never do that without Bellatrix discovering the baker's secret. On Inky's 18th birthday, she invites Bellatrix to celebrate with her on a special date. The 2 mares have been an item for only a few weeks now, so Inky is ecstatic to properly welcome Bellatrix into her family, oblivious to her own impatience. The other 5 bakers are busy saying goodbye to the Cake family at the train station, since the family has decided to leave town due to all the disappearances, so the couple have Sugar Cube Corner to themselves. Inky brings Bellatrix down into the secret basement, happily showing off the gruesome display of trophies collected from each of their victims. Bellatrix is horrified and shocked. She insists that Inky is too kind to do something so evil. She's seen Inky, the real one, and she knows that Inky is a pony capable of love more than any other. Bellatrix asks Inky to run away with her and leave this all behind. They can report the bakers to the police and flee Ponyville. Inky is torn, struggling to process the offer. This isn't what she expected to happen. Everything about Bellatrix was perfect, so why didn't Bellatrix react perfectly to her secret? Inky insists that they can be happy here, trying to convince Bellatrix to join the bakers, but Bellatrix is appalled. She tells Inky that she has to go. She won't report the bakers to the police, since she loves Inky too much to see her go to prison with her family, but she's too devastated to stay here with her. Inky doesn't take the breakup well at all. She yanks Bellatrix back and drags her farther into the basement, ignoring the mare's frantic screams and pleas for mercy. Inky wants to have Bellatrix, so if she can't have her, then nobody would. She kills the mayor violently, but quickly regrets the act as soon as she sees the bloody stains on Bellatrix's beautiful coat. She cries, but the deed is already done. When the other bakers return, they find that Inky has made a small stuffed doll out of Bellatrix's fur. She tells them that she wanted to have Bellatrix, and now she'll be able to keep her forever. Finally, the ending! The Muffins Saga never had an ending, but the author has confirmed that the story would have ended with all of the bakers becoming alicorns and ruling the world. I hate that ending, so I wrote a completely different one, but you'll have to go read it yourselves on Minkie's gallery page. This video is too long. I've been recording for an hour and a half, so, I'm done. I'm stopping here. I'm good.
In conclusion, I don't know. Go read Icing on the Cake. I spent a lot of time on it for some reason. Guys, gals, and non-binary pals, I hope you have a great night. I'll see you all in my next live stream. Bye-bye!